Hello and welcome to a Galapagos whale shark project update. We are a few minutes late due to technical problems. However, we will give another 1 to 2 minutes until everyone is streamed in. We have it online on Facebook and YouTube already, and we will get it on Instagram in just a moment. In the meantime, everyone who is already online, explore your field already, find out where the comment section is, because that is your choice to ask questions, because all of that right now is obviously for you. So you have the chance to ask questions. So figure it out where it is. Maybe let us know from where you're streaming in right now, and send us a message. In the meantime, I will get Instagram online as well. Okay, that's good. Not sure. I think it should work. Okay. Okay, I can't figure. I think we should be online in Instagram as well. I don't see any messages yet. So if you're finding out that, let me see. Maybe give us a thumbs up in Instagram if it works.
Okay, I think we're online though with the other media.
Yeah. Okay, then let's go ahead. And in the meantime, when you're giving your presentation, I double check that really everything is working. I know that YouTube and Facebook are working, and we have already a couple of people signed in. So I would like to start introducing who you see on your screen right now. So you see myself, Jenny. I am the founder of the Galapagos Shark Diving company that is supporting the Galapagos Whale Shark Project. And the director and founder of the Galapagos Whale Shark Project is Jonathan Green. You see him as well in the picture, and he founded several years ago the project. That's a shark research project studying the unique population of whale sharks in the Galapagos. And without saying too much, I will give it over to him to give you a little bit of an update. I know that many of you either traveled with us or heard about the Galapagos whale shark before. We want to give you today an update of things that were happening this year or the last years to give you up to speed. And in the end, we want to give you the possibility to ask as many questions as possible. So ask us anything you want. This will be obviously recorded, this live session, so we will put it online afterwards. So if you want to rewatch it or have other questions afterwards, there are still time to do so. But here you will get directly an answer by Jonathan or myself. So use the possibility. Please find possibilities to ask questions. So the first questions are already coming in. Find your comment field where you can ask questions and maybe tell us where you're coming from, so you know that it works. And by the end of the presentation, we will then give you the possibility to ask the questions. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone that's joining us right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some probably. I think that covers most of the areas that we're connected to right now, the folks that are watching. Thank you for joining us for this. It's an update, but the idea of this is more to allow all of you viewing to ask questions. We get a lot of questions throughout the year, which can be very simple, they can be fairly complex. And I think this is the best forum because it gives us an indicator of where your interest lies or what worries you might have, what you would like to know more about, rather than us just giving you information about the project itself. As Jenny mentioned, we're now heading towards our 15th year, really, since the conception and launching of the Galapagos Whale Shark Project. And once again, I would stress that when we launched this, I thought, well, 3-4 years, maybe 5 years, and we'll be done, and we'll know absolutely everything there is to know about the whale sharks in Galapagos. As you probably know, for those of you who've been following us for a number of years, that's not really the case. In fact, the more we discover, the more mysterious these whale sharks become. But little by little, we have pieced together a scenario, a story, data which indicates what they're doing in and around the Galapagos Islands in terms of their movements, their diving behavior, their habitat usage, what sort of population we're looking at. So is it a big one, a small one? All of this data helps to give us the tools that we need to be able to create management policy. And then with entities like the Galapagos National Park, the governments of Ecuador, and then of course Costa Rica, who joined recently in the creation of a binational marine reserve. Those are the tools that we need to create management policy that is used to create legislation that can then help enforce conservation. So it's a huge challenge. I won't deny, much bigger than we initially thought. And the challenge itself is growing as the threats to whale sharks grow as well. And those threats are multiple. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that we've done this year. The work that we're planning and hoping to do next year, and why it is that we carry out specific tasks. What information can we garner from specifically the work that we're doing that might help the conservation of whale sharks as a whole? I think most of you know that we had a hiatus, unfortunately, in our research. We were unable to get out into the field last year in 2023 to do the northern work, the northern field trip. There was, however, a field trip that went out to tag sharks, whale sharks, in the southern area of the Galapagos Marine Reserve. And I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But first and foremost, I'd like to start off with this. This is a photograph which I absolutely love, because this is Galapagos. This is very unique. We have these huge adult whale sharks which are coming into the Galapagos Marine Reserve. Over 97% of all of our sightings are these massive adults. And you probably know from previous talks that over 99% of these adults are females. So that was the first amazing discovery that we were able to make. That created a lot of, or brought up a lot of questions. Why are so many females coming to Galapagos? And because the fact that they had these huge distended bellies, of that we're trying to gather information to determine. So you can see there a diver which is about 2 meters from top of the head to the tip of the fins, 6 feet more or less, if you're talking feet. So these are huge animals that we're talking about, the size of a single-decker school bus. I will just quickly play this. Some of you might have seen it before, but quite a few maybe haven't. But if you do meet a whale shark in the wild, it really is the most inspiring experience you can possibly have. It's life-changing. There's no doubt about that. I still remember very, very clearly my first encounter, and it was exactly like this. A whale shark swam beneath myself and another diver, only about 1 meter below us. And I knew from the spots what it was, but I never thought in my life that I'd actually have the privilege and good luck to swim with one of these animals. So absolutely huge. These gentle giants are swimming by. Again, they're filter feeders. We over and over we hear, well, aren't they dangerous? No, they're not dangerous at all, unless you're dumb enough to get in the way of the tail, and then you'll get a sort of slap across the your entire body, because the tail's about 8 feet tall. So the tail's the only dangerous part about them. Otherwise, these animals are not dangerous at all, and they are in danger of extinction. Their status was demoted or decreased from threatened to endangered in 2016. They are being hunted, and I've mentioned this before, for various different things. They're being hunted for their fins. They're being hunted now and fished for oil. This is mainly in China. Unfortunately, the market, like for most shark products, it's Southeast Asia, it's mainland China, Taiwan. These areas are where the main consumer markets are. However, they're being fished by many, many different vessels and nationalities around the world. But of course, the market is mainly China, Southeast Asia. We know that they're being taken in Galapagos because of the encounter in 2017, 7,200 sharks in that particular vessel. But these are not the only threats that they're facing. Increasingly marine pollution, vessel strikes. There was a very, very disturbing video just this last week on Facebook. I think it was taken in Mexico, of a whale shark whose dorsal fin was shredded, but also the fin itself, the caudal fin, the tail was absolutely sliced through, and it was hanging. Pieces of the tail, segments of it, were hanging by little threads of muscle and skin, and the whole thing was sort of, when every time she tried to move her tail, the whole thing would sort of collapse like a pack of cards. It was incredibly distressing, and these encounters are increasing. So marine pollution, nets, plastic pollution, and so on and so forth. This one is one that you've seen this video before. We were fortunate enough to find. We cut the net off the animal. It was dissected. It was actually amputating her dorsal fin, and would have done so had we not been successful in taking it off. So, but how many of these animals are suffering or injured or die out of sight, out of mind? And therein lies the problem, that our oceans are so vast. They cover 4/5 of the planet, and yet we know very, very little about them. We know more about the lunar surface. The lunar surface is mapped better than our ocean floors are mapped. So satellite tagging is one of the tools that we use to track animals, not just around the Galapagos, but regionally. And our hope is that we can begin to track them as they cross the oceans themselves, because then and only then will we have a clear idea of exactly how far they're traveling. And as I mentioned, a lot of this data, specifically animals like Coco, who swam from Darwin to Cocos Islands, that data is used then specifically to convince the governments of Ecuador and Costa Rica, who I must say did not need, fortunately, a lot of convincing at that time, because talks have been going on between the two nations for quite a number of years. And I think it's an incredibly forward-thinking and admirable step that they're taking to try to cover waters that cross boundaries. Because, of course, whale sharks or turtles or marine mammals, they're not respecting these boundaries. They cross from one nation to another. And so if the nations of a region, of an area, don't get together and work together, then, of course, there won't be unilateral protection. And that's what we really need. So that move to create the Reserva Marina Hermandad, Brother Sisterhood Marine Reserve, is a huge step forward. Now what we need to do is to enforce these marine protected areas. So you'll see figures, less than 1% of the high seas is really protected, less than 4% really of our oceans has strong protection, and less than 8% of our oceans really has written protection that demonstrates a will to protect these areas. Unless we can achieve at least a quarter or 30% of the entire surface area of our oceans, we're talking high seas everywhere, then there is no future for our planet, either for the species that inhabit the oceans or those that live on the land. And I think there is no clearer identification than the peril that we are facing right now than the recent climatic events or meteorological events that show that climate change is beginning to affect us. It's not tomorrow, it is now. In fact, it was this last week. You probably saw the horrific reports that are coming in from places like Florida. But the week before, it was Europe that suffered massive flooding. And this is because of climate change. So if we cannot protect our oceans, if we cannot protect the ecosystems and have a more holistic approach to realize that our globe needs protection. It's not just isolated areas that we can protect and feel good about it. We need to get on with global protection. This is one of the first steps that has been taken. And of course, is as I say, it's a huge step forward. But every nation on this planet has a responsibility. And I'm talking to those nations out there that have huge fishing fleets that are simply absolutely emptying the oceans. We're talking about the purse seiners. If you eat tuna, please try and make sure it's coming from a a sustainable source. Unfortunately, things like tuna more and more are not sustainable. And the idea that you can have dolphin-safe tuna, for example, is probably pretty laughable, because they're going to die, they're going to be caught in the nets. Those aren't the only species. Whale sharks are being caught, and the purse seine tuna fishing fleets are actively seeking out whale sharks because they know that the tuna and the whale sharks are possibly feeding on similar species. So when they find the whale sharks, they'll probably find, by association, species such as tuna. So a lot of the megafauna is in danger as collateral damage. Even if it's not being targeted, these species are being taken. So your habits, what you do as an individual, does make a difference. It's all very well to say, well, why don't they do something about it? And this is one of my favorite questions. Well, who is they? There is no they. There's no authority out in the high seas. It's every single person, all 7 to 8 billion of us that live on this planet, that need to make that difference, even if it's going down to your local supermarket and saying, okay, where did that fish come from? Or looking at the can of tuna and saying, okay, is this tuna really sustainable? That's the only way, as consumers, that we can actually stop the practices of excessive fishing in the oceans. All right, that's it. My rant for the day is over. Well, maybe not. So you can see the fishing pressures around South America. You can see the map there on the right-hand side, the reds, the oranges. So the coastal waters of South America are being absolutely hammered, but so are the high seas as well. A lot of these ones out there, and I clicked on a random spot in the Pacific Ocean outside the Galapagos Marine Reserve, and what you come up with, 3 vessels all drifting long line. What are they after? They're after sharks, but obviously other species are being taken at the same time. Because unfortunately shark trade in this region is so high, CITES decided to take the step to actually halt all exports of all products, shark products. So it doesn't matter whether it's shark fins, shark oil, whether it comes from a hammerhead, whether it comes from a whale shark. In February of this year, CITES passed a ruling that no country could legally export shark products from Ecuador, which is a fantastic step forward. However, it indicates the depth of the problem, because this photograph here shows one of the issues. You can see that none of these animals have their fins. Why? All the fins have been taken off. Those are dried and sent out to Southeast Asia. But the meat from the shark is then exported illegally through the borders in Peru, where it's sold on the local markets. So again, one of the things that you can do, shark is being eaten all around the world. If you go to a fish and chip shop in the UK, you will be served shark or ray, and it's there on the menu. You look for rockfish, you look for skate, you look for all these species. They crouch the names or hide the names with something which doesn't sound shark-like, but shark is available. It's available in all the supermarkets. So again, just check that what you are eating is not an endangered species. So anyway, the ban of all products of sharks from Ecuador is a fantastic move. However, that did cause us some problems this year, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. One of the things which one of our core team members, Sophia, has been working closely with, together with Alex Hearn, is the Southern Aggregation. So you might remember that a few years ago, we've known about whale sharks being seen sporadically, but at sometimes during the year fairly consistently in the southerly parts of the marine reserve. So between Floriana and Isabella, to the south of Hispaniola, all of those areas. So we know that at certain times of the year there seem to be gatherings. We're not too sure why that is, whether it's food-based, whether it's mating, whether it's birthing, who knows. So the idea is that if we also have a look at that and collect data from the Southern Aggregation, then we can begin to piece together more pieces of the jigsaw. So last year, Sophia and Alex headed out in a small fishing boat, small fishing vessel. They're not overnighting. No, the operation doesn't mean that you have to, as with Darwin, we have to stay there for 2 weeks because it's so far away. Because of the closer access to ports, they were able to leave from places like San Cristobal and Isabella Island directly. However, they did use a small ultralight plane to do the spotting, because these animals are spread out over a much wider area. So they had to spot them, radio down then to the folks that were in the small speedboat, and then they were able to get in close And when the pilot literally said, "Okay, they're coming up to your at your 3 o'clock position, jump in the water now," they would jump in. So that was the way that they were able successfully to tag 5 sharks in the south. Of course, you can't use tanks at that time; makes it more complicated. Up in the north in Darwin, we're always doing it with tanks because we sit on the rocks and the whale sharks very conveniently swim by us. This is not the case with the southern aggregation. So you can see here Sophia free diving and tagging the sharks, these massive big sharks. I think you can get an idea of the size just looking at the dorsal fin in proportion to Sophia. So she tagged her successfully 5 sharks, and we started to get the first information coming out from the southern aggregation. Unfortunately, this year, due to logistical problems and complications with the permitting procedures with the Galapagos National Park, we were not able to get out this year and tag the southern aggregation. However, we hope to do so next year. In the meantime, I mentioned that we also are carrying out, and that this is not just a single event, for example, to continue with outreach, to a certain extent education, but this was an exciting trip that we were able to do to the UK. We were invited to talk at corporate businesses, but also in schools and colleges, and we went into some inner urban, underprivileged areas. I've already said this, but I'll say it again. One of the most inspiring experiences, I think, certainly that I've had, was how excited young children are. These were most between the ages of there in their assembly hall. They all sat there on the ground because they didn't have a bigger venue with chairs to sit in, and they just listened with open eyes. And then the quotes that started coming out were just fantastic. And that, of course, is from the generation that is going to inherit the unholy mess that we are leaving this world in. So these are the people that in the future will have to take charge. And if we can't completely reverse the things that we've done, they're going to have to work hard to establish or reestablish an equilibrium. And it was incredible how personally they took this. How can I make a difference? What should I do? What should I be doing at home? What can I tell my mother and father when I go home, how they can help? It was just fantastic to see the response. And also corporate business, which is looking up now, because they realize that their production, what they are doing has this ripple effect, of course. Why is it that we have increasing temperatures? How can corporate industry and businesses change their modus operandi? So I think these are small steps, but they're very, very important ones. And I think it's incredibly important to continue talking about this and increasing that outreach of how every individual can make a difference. And I think what was interesting, and one of the lessons we took from that series of talks, was how interested people are about the ocean carbon cycle. So a lot of talk has been going on in the last 2 decades or 3 decades about the forests of the planet, how CO2 is absorbed by the plants. At night time they give off oxygen, etc., and so you have this cycle of carbon dioxide being removed from the atmosphere, oxygen being given off. This is something which has been happening obviously throughout the entire geological history of the planet, and allows the life on Earth to exist in the manner that it does. But recently we've come to realize as a scientific community that the oceans absorb far, far, far more CO2 carbon out of the atmosphere than all the terrestrial plants combined. Up to about 50 times more can be absorbed by the oceans. And this is thanks to filter feeders like the whale sharks, for example. So we need to be looking at the oceans. We need to be looking at ocean acidification, ocean warming, changes in ocean currents and so on, to better understand how we can facilitate the fortification of this ecosystem so that it does continue to protect us through carbon sequestration. Very, very important indeed. So coming to more recent events, in June of this year, after a 2-year hiatus, again, sadly, we were unable to carry out the Northern expedition because of a simple lack of funding. We put the 4 different points that we wanted to look at and said, okay, this is the work which is most important right now. We would like to head up to Wolf and Darwin, carry out ultrasound, blood draw, satellite tagging, and photo ID, all of which are probably the 4 pillars of the work that we're doing. And the exciting news, for those of you who watched the update in June, you'll know that we were very, very pleased that our Japanese team were going to join us again from Okinawa. These are experts in ultrasound and in blood chemistry for elasmobranchs, for rays and for sharks. So after 6 years, because of the interruption through COVID and all sorts of things that have been going on, they were able to join us again and bring down the world's only freestanding medical professional ultrasound units. They also come down with the blood draw units that you might be familiar with. Some of you have seen this video before, but I think it's interesting to show. I'll turn down the volume a little bit there. How it is that we draw blood. We were the very first team, the Galapagos whale shark team, in 2018 to successfully both draw blood from free swimming animals. It's been done in aquariums. It's been done with animals that have been netting. But both ultrasound and blood draw from free swimming animals had not been done by any team out in the ocean environment. And as you can see, absolutely zero reaction from this very, very large female. The extension tube there, you find, we don't know exactly where the blood vessels are, so we're looking for blood saturated tissue. You keep suction on the tube and you get your sample, you take your sample on board. And what we're specifically looking at there is the blood chemistry. So hormonal levels, but also things like lactic acid, which are indicators of basic health, the health of the individual, but also the chemicals, blood hormones, which might be indicators of the state of reproductivity. Is it pregnant? Are they not pregnant? Are they carrying egg follicles and so on, which might be then confirmed by the ultrasound. So this is what we were trying to do, and this is what we carried out in June. So this is Dr. Rui Matsumoto, as I say, one of the world's experts. In fact, the very, very top of the experts in the world at carrying out ultrasound. The little black case that he's carrying there, which raises a few eyebrows, as you can imagine, one of the other divers who are visiting the Darwin area see us in the water. He's carrying this little black briefcase. They do wonder what on earth could be in there. That's a 17 kilo, 35 pound unit. It's a Hitachi medical ultrasound, and the wand you can see in his right hand is what he uses actually to carry out the ultrasound of the abdominal area of the whale shark. Because nobody's ever taken an ultrasound of a pregnant whale shark, we really didn't know at the beginning where to look. So do you look at the top of the abdominal region? Do you look at the bottom? Do you do a transverse, so from one side to the other, or do you do it longitudinally? So all of these things we had to sort of work out in the field as we were going along. In 2018, we were lucky enough to find the ovaries. It was a female that had a fairly big distended belly. We didn't see any fetuses. We didn't see any evidence that could conclusively show that she was pregnant, but she did have egg follicles, which might indicate that she was passing through Galapagos, then heading to an area where males were to breed. We don't absolutely know, but this, of course, was very exciting, a world first, and that resulted in the paper that you see on the screen right now. And this is what it looks like for Rui. So every person in the team has a job. So one person might be going in to do photo ID. One person goes in to place a satellite tag on the dorsal fin. One person will be going in to do blood sound. One person goes in to do the ultrasound. The whole team converges on the animal. We try to make it as uninvasive as possible. So we're seeking new methods for attaching the satellite tags and so on, so that we don't harm the animal, because that's the very last thing that we want to do. But this is how you get an ultrasound from the world's largest fish and the world's largest shark. So you can see I slowed it down a little bit, but there's Rui carrying out a transverse, so from one side to the other, and then a longitudinal all the way down the belly. And as he's finishing that, Kiyomi, also his colleague from Okinawa, a world expert both in ultrasound and blood draw and blood chemistry, moves in to then draw blood from the pelvic fin. As you can see, absolutely zero reaction from the female whale shark. She continues happily along her way, perhaps a little bit curious as to what's going on around her, but really unawares of anything further. These are the tags. These are the tags we've been using over the last, I guess, about 5 to 6 years now. We've been using the Splash 10 tag. This is a dorsal mounted tag which has like a spring loaded, like a clothes pin. So you simply slide it down, and with pressure it grips onto the dorsal fin. That's what it looks like when it's on. And our hope is, of course, this causes zero stress and zero injury to the animal. And this is one of our big successes from this year. I wanted to talk about this one. We did struggle with the satellite tagging. We lost 3 tags to our knowledge. Unfortunately, on the good side, we had so many shark sightings in Wolf and Darwin. This has been an extraordinary year. Post El Nino, so we came out of El Nino into an El Nino neutral, and then moved gradually into a so we've had the Pacific Ocean, and now we've come into a cooling period of that same area. However, still with very, very high temperatures. So anyway, we as we transited into the Nina, we've seen an influx coming in, particularly with some schools which defy the imagination. You're talking 500 plus sharks schooling around you, above you, below you, on either side, passing literally within 3 feet, a meter of where you are. If you sit there very quietly, don't move, don't look at them directly, because they don't like the eyeballing. They don't like to make eye-to-eye contact, and you hold your breath briefly underwater as they're very, very close. Blacktip sharks, we had Galapagos sharks, we even had a couple of sightings of tiger sharks up in Darwin, which is very exciting, a very large female, which we think now may well be resident in Darwin as well. So sky high, which is incredibly show that some places on the ocean, just a few, are still very, very very healthy manner. So if you haven't gone to dive in the Galapagos yet, dive the Galapagos. There's no place like it on Earth. Anyway, we do think, unfortunately, that these very curious shark impulses being given off are detected by the Lorenzi sensors that they have, and these bigger from the sharks. They have these sensors around the mouth, detect very, very weak electrical impulses, and almost certainly that seems very exciting, possibly food-like to them, and they go up and they hit strike the dorsal fin area where the tags are, and probably rip the tags right off. You remember that the tags are simply held by pressure, so they rip those off, and those can then fall into the water. And we don't have a floating splash tag right now, because it would just be so we. But this particular tag 262715, who is called Elise, and I think Jenny's going to talk more about naming of sharks later on, and how you can become an active supporter, follower of the project, and actually help individuals. And you can elect a shark and name it. But anyway, Jenny's going to talk more about that in a moment. She, we tagged her in Darwin, if I'm not mistaken, around the 25th, 26th of June. Since then, and her last pinging, you can see on my screen, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but she pinged on the 13th of October, today, which is very exciting. And she pinged at 6:23 a.m., so 6:23 GMT, which would have been just after, well, I mean, for Galapagos time, that would have been around about 11 o'clock or 11:23 of the 12th, yesterday. So of course there's 6 to 7 hours of difference between us and GMT right now. So she pinged just last night, is very active, but her track She left the Galapagos Islands, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, of my screen rather. Can you see the cursor? Can anyone indicate that you can see the cursor? I'm not sure if anyone can. So you might see all the way on at the 10 o'clock position in the Pacific Ocean. You might be able to, yes, you can see the cursor. I'm being told. Thank you, Sophie. So you can see there this little group of islands. Any guesses as to that one? Some of you have been there. And that is, of course, Hawaii. So she swam more than halfway, in fact, 2/3 of the way to Hawaii. Then she disappeared for a period of almost a month, which had us sort of holding our breath and hoping that it wasn't another event like the whale shark that we lost to fishing in an area much closer to Galapagos some years ago. But then she popped up. So we think she was probably diving. Why, we don't know. We're going to look at her diving behavior later, and Sophie is going to be analyzing that. And then hopefully we'll give you an update as to what she was doing in each one of these areas and where she was diving, because she'd given us an incredibly consistent track. Her track was all Class B, like this one here, which means that it's a medium level, neither strong nor weak on a scale of strength of a satellite transmission. So it's picked up by the Argos satellites above. A B is a decent signal, but it shows it's definitely on the animal. So the tag is only just above the water, and she was very consistent. Not every day, but every 24 to 48 hours, we'd get a position, and then she disappeared for nearly a month, just over 3 weeks. So we were kind of holding our breath, hoping that, or fearing the worst, but she popped back up again and seemingly has done a U-turn. So is she going to return back to the Galapagos? Is she then going to go up towards the Gulf of California? You can see towards the due north position. Up there, Sea of Cortez certainly reports big adult whale sharks, so maybe she's off to the coasts of Mexico. Who knows? It's a mystery, but this is a unique tag or a unique track, and she's traveled well over 7,000 kilometers since she was tagged in the Galapagos, and that's only the two-dimensional track, of course, because what you're not seeing is how deep she's diving there. She may be diving down 1,000 meters, almost 2,000 meters. She hasn't imploded her tag, which our tags this year are configured for 2,500 meters depth. She hasn't crushed it yet, and we're hoping that she's not going to do any deep dives, because we really do want to be able to keep watching her as she moves around. We'll post more about Elise later on, but that is a very, very exciting track and something new. So every single year that we place these tags on the whale sharks, we're not getting the same information. We're getting very, very different information, and once in a while one of the sharks does something completely unique, something we've never seen before, and that's the case of this one, Elise. However, there's a bit of a two-sided or a two-edged sword to that. The further they roam, the more they can be affected by what I mentioned before: plastic pollution, vessel strikes. And this is a headline from 4 days ago, a paper which came out, which you can see here: Climate-Driven Global Redistribution. An ocean giant predicts increased threat from shipping. 15,000-fold is the possible threat as whale sharks change their movements, their behavior. It would seem that they're moving more into areas that might cross major shipping lines, which means that something the size of a tanker or a container ship, A, they're not going to see the shark, and B, by the time they do see it, they wouldn't be able to slow down, even if they wanted to, because of course time for these big vessels is money. As a tanker is crossing the ocean, you're talking hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a day. So they're not going to slow down for these animals. So what we have to look at is how we can mitigate this kind of effect. And the changing conditions in our oceans are going to put these animals more at risk, as we have a changing scenario with marine conditions, changing of currents, changing of ocean temperatures, and so on. So this paper, I was very happy to see, have been picked up by a whole series of mostly green newspapers or media outlets. Obviously, it didn't figure in a few of them who don't care too much about the planet, who shall remain nameless, but look like a little red animal. But anyway, we won't talk about those. But a lot of the media outlets did indeed pick this story up. So there is concern about these ocean travelers. And so the more information about their tracks, their long-range movements, the more data we have to then go to governments to create the legislation that might be needed to create slowdown areas where there's an enforced slowdown, and that's the only way that we will be able to mitigate this. And this is already happening in places like Antarctica, for example, where we have an enforced 10-knot speed limit in certain areas where marine mammal activity is particularly high. So it can be done. You can have geofenced areas where you track the vessels going through, and if they go over a certain speed, then they will receive a fine. So this is the kind of data that we need to then create the protective measures and the information necessary. So good and bad news there. This one, on the other hand, is an amazing piece of news. I think Jenny's going to talk more about this, but Sophie in Galapagos posted this. She is busy working with a number of dive guides. Nati Cifuentes, for example, Kike Moran, Paulo Tobar. I don't know if any of you are watching right now. A huge thank you to you and others. There are too many right now to name, for uploading, for sending us images. Mainly they send them to Sophia and she uploads them to Wildbook. So I believe I'm going to hand over there to Jenny.
Yes, thank you,
talk
Jonathan.
more about photo ID and how you can help with your photographs and your images of whale sharks from around the world.
Perfect. Thumbs up if everyone can hear. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jonathan, for the mentioning of the 700 individuals that are identified in Galapagos. And I think that's a huge highlight that we have in the Galapagos right now. As he said, Sophia was working on it quite hard to identify everything. And how do we do that? So how do you identify a whale shark? Many of you that traveled already with us know about citizen science programs. So where everyone, doesn't matter if you swim, snorkel, or dive with a whale shark, can upload photos. So for humans, we have our left and right side of our fingerprints, and whale sharks do have the same. They have the left side and the right side of dot patterns and lines. So you see in this picture on the left-hand side, that is where the pattern is. So if you happen to get a photo of the left or right side of a whale shark with this pattern, then you have to upload it. So you see a little bit further zoomed in on the right-hand side, it starts behind the gills that you can see on the left-hand side until the dorsal fin. And they have a unique pattern of dots, how we can identify each individual. Like every human can be identified with their fingerprints. That is the same with whale sharks. So if you swam, snorkeled, or dive with whale sharks, there's still time to upload your photo if you have a similar shot like that. The dots look like stars, as you can see in this picture. And we do have a software. So when you're uploading the photo, a software runs over it and can identify the stars. The software used came originally from NASA and was used for deep space objects mapping. So you see, it looks like stars. It can be handled as stars. And the stars can be connected, as you can see in the next picture. And that is what the researchers will do after you upload your photo. One more slide, Jonathan. Perfect. So when you upload your photo, Sophia, most likely for the Galapagos, will go into the system, will dot or find the dots, and then the software will compare it with all the photos that are already uploaded and will say, okay, is there a match or is there no match? If there's a match, you will get an email, you get an information that your whale shark was resighted. So you can basically stay in contact with the whale shark that you saw over a period of time. And that helps us, obviously, in a lot of different questions. As more information we get, and we now have it over several years, and with 700 whale sharks as a sample, you finally can start asking questions like migration. You can slowly ask questions like resident, mortality rate. Maybe in a few years, we also can talk a little bit about population indices. So there's a lot of things that we suddenly can do with all of these data coming. And obviously, it's the best way to track an animal passively for you, but also for us researchers. So this data is actively used. And as Jonathan already said, it's the dive guides that are now supporting us with photos, but due to Sophia's work the last years, not only dive master, but also fishermen started submitting photos if they're getting some. We have a lot of researchers, obviously, that are submitting photos, and many of you that are either traveling with us or hearing about the project because dive masters talking about it are uploading photos as well. And this work is really crucial. And for this year, it's really a highlight. And we managed to get 700 whale sharks ID'd in the Galapagos. And we're seeing resightings. So we have 19 whale sharks that were resighted in the last years. The earliest was a few days up to a year, and then the longest period was 14 years. So a whale shark after 14 years came back to the Galapagos. And with this information, you obviously then start asking new questions. And with that, I will hand over back to Jonathan to continue with the presentation.
Okay, I wanted to include this little video here, if it works. Does it? Yes. So this we frequently get asked the question. So what's your research vessel look like? And people imagine sort of Jacques Cousteau going out on there, on a space age beautiful thing with dry labs and wet labs and submersibles and helicopters and so on. So I thought I'd just add quickly this. This is our very, very beautiful, highly beloved Ualka 2, and these are some of the fishermen that Jenny just mentioned that have been working with us now and working with other projects like the plastics coastal cleanup that Sophie works with, as well as many other science projects as well, because obviously our budget doesn't go to a space age craft, nothing like SpaceX. So we use this converted fishing vessel, and it's a twofold thing. One, it's within our budget. But two, it means that fishermen that otherwise would be out fishing in the Galapagos, and all of them admit quite freely that they have fished sharks in the past, but they've begun to understand better the work that's being done by the scientists, but more importantly, why it is that we need to do this work. And they're becoming sympathetic to the cause. They no longer go out and shark fish. They do white fishing and lobster fishing and things like that, which are more sustainable. So they then are also acting as ambassadors, and they talk to their fellow fishermen. So it's got a very twofold purpose. And now they champion the cause. They champion the actual project itself. We are 13 or 14 people on this little vessel. As you can see, it's quite small. We do actually have a functioning, we have 2 toilets, 1 shower. We don't have hot water on this vessel. So we get the question all the time. You can see it's quite small. So you get to know your co-workers and the team very, very, very well. But we get the question, why don't you take volunteers each year going out? Unfortunately, we simply don't have the room. We don't have the wherewithal to lodge volunteers in Galapagos. So if that's your interest, we would love to take volunteers out, but currently, unfortunately, we can't, because we simply just don't have the space or the financing. And I'm not sure how many volunteers would be really gung-ho for those kind of conditions. What we have seen a little bit this year is an increase, and I know that there was a question came in about interaction with illegal fishing. We have seen a number of fish attraction devices or FADs in that white plastic container. Under here will be a collection of bones from an animal that has been slaughtered. And that, of course, as they rot, helps to attract animals, particularly sharks, as it drifts through the marine reserve. And I think this is a question that came in just a short while ago. So yes, we do see active fishing, or at least indicators of active fishing. There is a huge number of vessels around the outside of the Galapagos Marine Reserve still. Many of them are long-distance fishing vessels, so we're not talking just about the local fleets from the countries, the neighboring nations. We're talking about fishing vessels that have come all the way across the Pacific Ocean. So yes, the pressure is increasing every single year. There are more and more fishing vessels on the outskirts of the Galapagos. And I include this one just as a little bit of an indicator of what the problem is. So are people fishing directly inside the marine reserve? Yes, they are. Yes, there are local fishing efforts that go on inside the marine reserve. Some of these smaller vessels do not carry AIS, so they can't be tracked, or they switch their AIS off. But what you see here is a maneuver where a fishing vessel comes probably from the mainland of Ecuador, or has recently been refueled in that area, skirts the outside of the marine reserve, drops the long lines in the water with radio buoys on them, and then it goes outside the marine reserve. And if you draw a straight line between here and here, of course, that is well within the marine reserve itself. So the long lines, undetected, silently drift through, killing on their way through and attracting other sharks out to other long lines, which are set outside. So ostensibly, officially, they're not fishing in the marine reserve, but they are setting lines on one side, allow these to drift with the ocean currents through the marine reserve. And so, of course, they are continuing to draw sharks out of the marine reserve itself. So there is a problem, there is a continuing problem. We're fighting it and we will continue to fight it. But obviously, everybody has to keep the pressure up. And I think this is something which, as I mentioned earlier on, this is something which every single person shares a responsibility in. What we do, how we live, makes a difference. So that's a little bit of an update. We'll keep you updated as to further results. We met a couple of challenges this year with our satellite data, with our ultrasound data, because the unit sprung a leak. Fortunately, the unit itself was not damaged. The whole thing is worth about $80,000. So obviously, when it had a slight leak, put it back in the challenges that a viable operating depth of about 30 centimeters, about a foot, and we need to see deeper into the abdominal cavity. So we need centimeters or 50 centimeters into the abdominal cavity. The challenges that we're facing with the ultrasound, that maybe we look more recent technology, but it's very, very costly indeed. And the other one, of course, with the CITES ruling, we had our blood samples from the last year poised out to Japan. New permit with the Japanese government. They're not accepting any shark samples from the Galapagos Islands because of the CITES ruling that no shark products can be exported from Ecuador. So we've run into a bit of a bureaucratic logistical problem, but we hope to get around that. And when we do have more updates, more information, we will let you know as soon as possible. Thank you. I think I talked way too much. I need to keep the talk shorter. But anyway, if you do have any urgent questions, we could possibly field them now. But thank you for joining us and for going through and listening to all of this.
Thank you, Jonathan. So let's check, because a couple of questions that came in you already answered. So the last thing you were talking about, not sure if you want to add anything. The question was, what biggest challenge the team faced during the last years?
The biggest challenge during when we went out 3 years ago, two or 3 years ago, 3 years, I guess it is now, still during the COVID pandemic, we were only there for a shorter period of time. We couldn't go out for any longer because of the funding difficulties. And we arrived in Darwin and had very, very powerful currents. Visibility was low and the currents were howling. And by strong currents, if you're a diver, you'll understand. We were looking at 4, 5, 6 knots of current. And at that point, a diver simply cannot swim in a controlled fashion. You look more like a tumbleweed in the Arizona desert as you're being sort of tumbled or pushed by the currents. So very, very difficult to get out to the animals, to carry out any kind of work, such as tagging. Blood draw was almost impossible. So we work with a lot of, I would say, local meteorological oceanic conditions, which can create difficult, great problems. Visibility is always a challenge. So if you have visibility, you simply don't see the whale sharks. So sometimes you swim out if the currents allow you into the waters off Darwin's Arch, and then you may be lucky and come across one as they're swimming backwards and forwards through that particular area. So those are some of the challenges. Ironically, the abundance of life, sometimes we have so many of one particular species, such as Creole fish, they can be there in the tens of thousands, and it's like a wall. Um, my favorite description of that was a wall of mouths, because the richness of the waters, so you can't see through the wall of fish. So it's a good problem to have, but on the other hand, it means that you have to swim out beyond that wall of fish. And then I think technological problems. So for some reason, the tags simply don't function, they don't transmit. So we put on a tag. It's a huge amount of effort and energy goes into actually getting a tag from the lab, the factory where it's built in the US, getting it to Ecuador, then getting the tag mounts, which come from Australia. So these are all custom made. Our tags are custom made and custom programmed, and the mounts, the actual clamp itself is custom made, the one that we use to put it on the dorsal fin. So we have to get some from Australia, some from the US, get all of that, get it on a vessel, get out to Darwin, and then we might get there with poor conditions. But that's part and parcel of the challenges of the work. And then of course you might put a tag on. You've invested $4,000 in hardware, and up till then, the actual physical cost of putting a tag on is probably around $10,000. So that's a combined almost $15,000 to deploy the tag by the time you've included the vessel costs and getting people to the Galapagos as well. And that goes out, and then we see the same shark the following day, and the tag's not on it because it's been removed by possibly a Galapagos shark or a silky shark that got excited when it detected those electrical impulses and possibly struck the tag and took it off. So those are the challenges. But I think that goes with the work. As I say, it's part and parcel. So it's incredibly frustrating. But then you get a tag like Elise, which is teaching us all sorts of new stuff, and we'll be looking at her diving behavior way out there in the middle of the Pacific and trying to figure out what is she doing out there. And that's what's so exciting about this work, that information, that little the glint of the gold in the pan as you're panning for gold, it's very exciting, and that information is worth its weight in gold. So the little bits of information that we get are so exciting, and that makes all of the challenges worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you. The next question that came in: could a tech device that records diving's depth and transmits it to the satellite when it comes to the surface provide important information?
Yes, there are a couple of what we call PAT tags, pop-up archival tags. We've used them in the past. They have their limitations, but they can give you more information about diving behavior. Sometimes they give you fine detailed data. And there's also a new one which has come out recently, and I think I might have mentioned this just very briefly back in June when we did an update of plans, which is called a BAT, or a birth activated tag. So the bats, as they call them, have to be inserted physically into the cloaca of the animal. So up until now, we haven't come across an idea that would allow us, or the technology that would allow us to insert these into the abdominal cavity where the fetuses are, because the tag itself is about the size of a goose egg or something. And if you insert this into the cavity of the animal when it gives birth, the fetus is coming out of the birth canal. So this has been done with tiger sharks and with hammerhead sharks with success. The moment that the fetuses come out and they give birth to these live young, as the whale sharks do as well, because they're ovoviviparous, as they give birth, the small tag itself is pushed out, and as it floats to the surface, it indicates where the animal gave birth. So that would be extremely useful for us to have, but we would have to get it probably almost 2 meters inside the animal. So much longer than any human could reach, but also we don't have a device that would do it. And I think in a free swimming environment, it's highly unlikely that a female whale shark would let us do that. But anyway, so a couple of things. If there are any engineers out there or anyone has any one of those sort of amazing ideas, about our ultrasound problem, if you work in the medical field and you know of an ultrasound that has deeper and accurate penetration, 40 centimeters. Any ideas also as how we could get a tag deep into the inside of a female whale shark? We'd be interested to hear your ideas.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, you can write it in the comments down below, and we will answer it here. We have a few more minutes. Also, we are nearly full with the hour already.
Mm-hmm.
I think only one. Wait a little bit. I mean, there was one question about the interaction with illegal fishing, but I think you answered that during your presentation already, and environmental threats. Yeah, I think there are no more questions. Then I would like to add at the end, obviously, the big questions: how can you support the Galapagos Whale Shark Project? One option, obviously, is to travel with Galapagos shark diving. We have a percentage of your price going directly as donation towards the project, but also all our profits are going to shark research, to the project, and are going to a big course. We have already donated over 62,000, and by the end of this year, we hope to surpass the mark of $80,000 that we donated to the projects together with you. So you making a difference by traveling with us. The second option, of course, is donate directly to the project. So I will put in the comment form below the video when we're posting it, the direct link. So you can basically donate directly to the project. And Jonathan said we can't take volunteers, obviously, on a trip. But if you are good in video editing, for example, and you are able to make like a little clip about what the project is doing, or you are very good in developing apps. So there are a lot of research projects within the Galapagos that urgently need help to designing apps, etc. So there are certain areas where there are still needed volunteers in the Galapagos. If it's not necessary with us, we always can point you in the right direction. But if you have skills like that, you obviously can support that as well. Do you have anything to add while I'm looking for the last questions, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, as I just put up on my screen, I would like to add a huge thank you. The names on the screen right now are some of the many. There are many individuals out there who are helping us in a very, very active way. To all of you that help us in any way, a huge thank you. We could not do it without you. Simple as that. Some of these are giving us logistical support. Some of us help us with some equipment and stuff. Some of us are helping financially. I will say again another thank you to everyone that travels with Galapagos Shark Diving, because Galapagos Shark Diving is our single biggest donor funding individual organization out there. As Jenny mentioned, over $80,000, which is absolutely huge. So thank you for all of you that travel with us and are making a difference directly. But yes, if you're interested in becoming involved, you can write to us, write to the addresses that Jenny is putting up. And if you have any further questions, also write to us, because we can do a post in the future where we put a list of questions that have been asked, and we can actually direct the answer. So a lot of the times people go away and they think, oh, I should have asked this or that and the other. So if you have questions, please send them to us.
That just came in, and I think that's an interesting one to ask. I have never heard of whale shark sightings in the Atlantic. Could it be that they avoid them? So you want to maybe talk about different?
Yeah, whale sharks are actually in all of the oceans, so Pacific, Atlantic, Indian Ocean. Most of the sightings that are found, for example, Indian and Pacific Ocean, are these juvenile males. So if you go to Indonesia, if you go to Australia, if you go to Mafia Island, Madagascar, in the Atlantic, there are whale sharks. They're mainly off areas of Africa, but they're also found in places in the Caribbean. So in Belize, for example, Gladden Spit has an aggregation of whale sharks that gather, I think, September, October, but that's a feeding aggregation, so they're looking for amphipods or copepods. However, St. Helena, which is mid-Atlantic, is one of the few places where both adult males and females have been sighted, and there is some indication that there may be attempted breeding going on there. There's a video which is I think filmed from a drone, and it shows what could be interpreted as breeding activity. They're also being found up towards the islands off Africa, Cape Verde and those sort of areas as well. So they may be extending their range, or they may be repopulating places where they were fished out before, such as the Mediterranean. So it's possible that the Mediterranean was a sighting just recently in the Mediterranean, which is, of course, connected through the Straits of Gibraltar with the Atlantic Ocean. So are they extending their range? Are they going back to places where they were historically? But yes, they've always been in the Atlantic, but not as common as they are in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So that's a fantastic question.
Thank you. I think with that, there are no new questions coming in. You want to have the final words, Jonathan?
I think we've talked enough for today. I'm leaving you with this picture of Darwin Arch. I know some refer to it today as Darwin's Pillars, but a name doesn't change. It's always going to be Darwin Arch. It is one of the most extraordinary places on the planet, and it represents what can be done with proper marine management. If areas are protected, the oceans can thrive. If the oceans thrive, so will our planet. It's a very, very simple equation. But if we continue to do nothing about it, we have no future, nor does our planet, at least with us on it. The planet will survive in some shape, form. So whatever you do, no matter how small it may seem, it makes a difference. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.